The night air outside the hotel felt heavier than usual, the kind of quiet that made every breath sound louder, every heartbeat echo a little deeper. Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of the driveway, staring at the glass doors that had just closed behind Sandra Bullock. He had watched her walk out with that calm, polite smile she always used when she was trying to hide something, and for the first time in years, he felt a kind of tension inside him that refused to settle. It was the type of tension that told him he had made a mistake by letting her walk away, without asking the question that had been burning inside him since the moment she avoided his eyes. It had been a long day, a strange day, the kind that left emotions floating just under the surface. They had attended a charity event together, something they had done many times in the past. They were used to smiling for cameras, shaking hands, exchanging jokes that helped them breathe through the long hours, but tonight had been different. Tonight, Sandra had been distant. She had smiled, she had laughed at all the right moments, but Keanu noticed every small detail that she tried to hide. He always did. He noticed the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking. He noticed how her voice softened when someone asked her how she had been lately. He noticed how she pressed her fingers gently against her temple as if fighting a headache that wouldn't go away. He noticed because he always noticed her. And yet he had said nothing. That regret was now twisting inside him as he realized she had left the event without telling him anything, leaving him with a hollow feeling, the kind that came when someone you cared about was drifting somewhere you couldn't reach. He didn't want to lose that connection, not now, not after everything they had been through separately and together, in silence and in shared moments. So when he saw her step into the cold night and walk toward the waiting car, something in him moved before he could think. As the car door closed and she looked down at her phone, Keanu made a decision. Without thinking, without planning, he started walking fast toward the exit. The automatic doors opened in front of him, and the sudden burst of chilly air hit his face as he rushed outside. He didn't call her name yet. He didn't want to startle her or make a scene in front of the hotel staff still standing near the entrance. He just knew he needed to reach her before she drove away. He needed answers. He needed the truth she clearly didn't feel ready to give earlier. He needed to make sure she was okay. Sandra's car had just begun to roll forward when Keanu finally broke into a run. He felt his heartbeat pounding in his ears, each step echoing like a drum on the pavement. He wasn't the kind of man who rushed after people. He wasn't the kind of man who chased anything, really, but this was different. Sandra was different. She always had been. The driver noticed him first. The car slowed. Sandra lifted her head from her phone, and when she saw Keanu running toward her, her eyes widened for a moment with a mixture of surprise and confusion. He reached the car, placed a hand gently on the window, and leaned forward as she quickly lowered it. "Keanu, what are you doing?" she asked softly, her voice holding more weight than he expected. He took a slow breath to steady himself. "I needed to talk to you, Sandy. I didn't want to let you leave like that." Her shoulders tensed ever so slightly. "Like what?" He paused, searching her expression. "Like you were carrying something heavy, something you weren't saying." For a moment, Sandra didn't speak. Her eyes shifted away just briefly, but it was enough for him to understand he wasn't imagining anything. She was hiding something, something she wasn't ready to say, something she carried alone, something that scared her. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice trembling just a little, "it's late. I don't want to worry you with things that aren't your responsibility." "You're my friend," he said gently. "Of course it's my responsibility. I care about you. That doesn't end when the cameras go off." She exhaled slowly, a shaky breath she tried to disguise as a normal one. "You always say the right things at the wrong time," she murmured, almost as if she were talking to herself. He gave a small, almost sad smile. "Then tell me the right time." Sandra leaned her head back against the seat. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if fighting the emotions rising in her. When she opened them again, they looked softer but more vulnerable than he had seen them in years. "Come with me," she suddenly said. Her words hung in the air, unexpected and heavy. Keanu frowned slightly. "Where?" "Just get in the car," she replied, her voice low, almost pleading. "Please." Keanu didn't hesitate. Something inside him told him that refusing was not an option. Something inside him told him that whatever she was hiding was something she couldn't face alone tonight. So he opened the car door, slid inside beside her, and closed it quietly. The moment the door clicked shut, the world outside felt distant, muted, almost frozen. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Sandra stared at her hands, twisting her fingers together nervously. Keanu watched her with quiet patience, giving her the space she needed to find her words. He didn't rush her. He didn't push. He simply waited the way someone waits for a truth that matters. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't leave early because I was tired," she said softly. "And it wasn't because I had something else to do. I left because I felt something inside me break a little tonight, and I didn't want anyone to see it. Not the cameras, not the people, not even you." Keanu felt his chest tighten. What broke? She swallowed, her throat visibly tight. Hope. Those 4 letters hit him harder than anything she could have said. "Hope for what?" he asked gently, his voice steady but deeply concerned. Sandra looked up at him, her eyes shimmering in the dim light of the car. "Hope for things getting easier. Hope for finding myself again. Hope for feeling like I'm doing something right. Hope for feeling whole." Keanu leaned closer, his voice calm but filled with sincerity. "You are doing things right. You are strong. You are one of the kindest people I've ever known." She shook her head. That's what everyone says when they don't really know what's going on. He felt that deeply. "Then tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me what's going on." Sandra let out a long, fragile breath. "I've been dealing with something, Keanu, something personal, something I didn't want to talk about in public, something I didn't even want to talk about with you because I didn't want to drag you into my chaos." He softened his voice. "Your chaos doesn't scare me." Those words made her eyes glisten, and she looked away as if afraid of what she felt. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm scared." The car grew silent again. The driver sat still, pretending not to hear anything. The hum of the city outside felt distant, like another universe. Keanu spoke gently. "Whatever it is, Sandy, you don't have to hide it from me." Her breathing grew uneven, her chest rising and falling more quickly. Her fingers trembled slightly as she wiped a tear that escaped before she could stop it. "I got news last month," she finally said, her voice cracking at the edges. "News I didn't want to believe, news I tried to ignore because pretending it wasn't real felt easier than accepting it." Keanu felt his body go still. "What kind of news?" She hesitated for several seconds that felt like hours. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The kind that changes everything." Keanu felt his heartbeat slow, then quicken. The way she said it, the weight in her voice, the fear behind her eyes, none of it felt small. None of it felt simple. "Sandra," he whispered, "tell me." Her hands trembled harder now. "Before I tell you, I need to know something," she said, her voice fragile. "I need to know if you're going to look at me differently after this, if you're going to see me as someone weaker, someone broken." Keanu shook his head immediately. "I could never see you as broken, not ever." Her lips parted slightly, as if those words hit her deeper than she expected. But still, she hesitated. "I'm afraid this will change the way you think of me," she whispered. "I'm afraid this will change us." Keanu leaned forward, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Nothing you say will make me walk away from you." That sentence cracked the wall she had been holding for weeks. Her body trembled, and tears finally fell freely as she whispered the words that had been tearing her apart. "Keanu, I'm sick." The world seemed to stop. Keanu's breath caught, his heart dropped, but he didn't move away. He didn't react with shock or panic. Instead, he reached out slowly, gently, and placed his hand over hers, grounding her in a way she desperately needed. "Sick how?" he asked, steady but soft. Sandra wiped her cheeks, trying to hold herself together. "I went to the doctor because I kept feeling tired. I kept getting these headaches. I kept losing focus. And then they found something they want to monitor, something they said could turn into something worse." Keanu's fingers tightened around hers, not with fear but with support, with presence. "What does that mean?" he asked quietly. She inhaled shakily. "It means I'm not okay, Keanu, and I've been pretending I am, pretending for the cameras, pretending for my kids, pretending for myself. But tonight something inside me cracked because I couldn't pretend anymore." Keanu felt emotion rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Sandra looked at him with eyes full of fear and guilt. "Because I didn't want you to worry, because I didn't want to be a burden, because I thought maybe if I kept quiet long enough it would go away. But it hasn't, and I'm scared. I'm really scared." The way she said those last words broke something in him too. He had seen her strong. He had seen her brave. He had seen her calm under pressure, but seeing her scared, truly scared, made him want to protect her with everything he had. He squeezed her hand. "You're not alone in this. You don't have to face this alone." She looked at him, her eyes wide, vulnerable, searching. "You say that now," she whispered, "but things change when the reality gets heavier." Keanu shook his head. "Not for me." But Sandra still seemed unsure. "Keanu, there's more." He felt a chill run through him. "More." She nodded slowly, wiping new tears. "Something I haven't told anyone, something I've been carrying for years, something that ties into why I'm so afraid now." Keanu leaned closer, his voice steady. "Tell me." But before she could speak, her phone buzzed loudly in her lap, making her flinch. She grabbed it quickly, glanced at the screen, and her entire expression changed. Fear. Real, immediate fear. Keanu's eyes locked onto hers. "What is it?" She swallowed hard, her voice cracking as she whispered the words that would become the cliffhanger of their night. "It's happening sooner than they said." Keanu froze. "What is?" Her hands shook violently as she held the phone, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "The thing they warned me about, it's starting, right now." And before Keanu could ask anything else, Sandra pressed a hand to her forehead, winced in pain, and whispered one final sentence that made his heart stop cold. "Keanu, I think I'm about to collapse." The night everything shifted. The moment Sandra's voice faded, the air inside the car felt like it had frozen. Keanu sat completely still, his heart thundering in his chest as her breathing grew faster and more uneven. Something inside him snapped into focus, a sharp, instinctive urgency that pushed away everything else. He leaned closer to her, his voice trembling but steady enough to keep her grounded. "Sandy, look at me," he whispered. She tried, but her eyes were unfocused, blinking rapidly as she pressed a shaking hand against her forehead. The soft glow from the streetlights outside flickered across her face, showing the pain tightening her features. I can't," she whispered, her voice weak. "Everything is spinning." Keanu gently placed one hand on her shoulder, the other hovering near her arm, ready to support her the moment she lost control. "It's okay. I'm here. Breathe with me." She tried to take a deep breath, but it came out jagged and broken. Her body trembled more violently now, and Keanu could see that she wasn't exaggerating. Something real was happening, something serious. "Driver," Keanu said sharply, still keeping his voice calm for her sake. "We need to go to the hospital, now." The driver didn't ask questions. He pulled away from the curb instantly, the car moving with a sudden urgency that matched Keanu's own. Sandra flinched at the motion, gripping the seat. "Keanu, I'm scared." He leaned closer, his voice soft but anchored with strength. "I know, you don't have to be scared alone. I'm right here, don't look away from me." She blinked hard, trying to keep her eyes open, trying to ground herself in his voice. I thought I had more time." Keanu's chest tightened. "What did they tell you?" She swallowed, barely able to speak. "They said, if my symptoms got worse, if the headaches came suddenly and stronger, it meant the condition was progressing faster." Another wave of pain hit her, and she pressed her hand to her head again. I didn't want to believe it. Keanu shifted closer, placing his hand gently under her elbow as her body wavered. "You're not fainting, not on my watch." She gave a weak, almost broken smile. "You can't control everything." "Watch me try," he whispered, and for a moment her expression softened with something almost like comfort, almost like relief. But the moment passed quickly. Pain washed through her again, sharper, stronger. Her breath hitched, her face tightening as she fought it. Keanu felt panic rise inside him, but he forced it down. She didn't need his fear, she needed his strength. The car sped through the streets, weaving between late-night traffic. The engine hummed low and urgent. Lights flashed across the windows in streaks of white and gold. And in the middle of all of it, Sandra clung to consciousness with everything she had. "Keanu," she whispered again, her voice barely there. "There's something I need to tell you before anything else happens." "Don't push yourself," he said quickly. "Save your energy." "No," she breathed, her fingers gripping his sleeve lightly. "I need to say it. I should have said it years ago." Keanu felt the world tilt for a moment, as if time slowed around him. Her voice, soft and trembling, carried something deeper than fear, something she had held for too long. "Sandy," he whispered, leaning in, "what is it?" Tears formed at the corners of her eyes, sliding down her cheeks slowly. I didn't distance myself because I was too busy or because work got in the way. I pulled back because I didn't want you to worry about me. I didn't want to complicate your life. Keanu shook his head, his voice low but firm. You don't complicate my life, you never did. She closed her eyes, more tears falling. And I didn't tell you about the diagnosis because I knew what you would do. You would care, too much, more than I deserved. Keanu felt that sentence like a punch to the chest. Don't ever say that. You deserve care, you deserve help, you deserve someone there for you. Her breath shook, and she held his arm tighter as the car jerked around another turn. I didn't want you to feel responsible for me. I'm not responsible for you, Keanu said softly. I care for you, that's different. Sandra let out a small, painful sound, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. I knew you would say that. The lights outside blurred faster as the driver took a shortcut toward the emergency entrance. Sandra's breathing had grown shallow now, each inhale slower than the last. Sweat formed along her hairline, and Keanu brushed it away gently with his fingertips, grounding her again. Stay with me, he whispered. You're okay, we're almost there. She blinked slowly, her eyelids heavy. I'm trying, she murmured, but it's getting harder. Keanu squeezed her hand tighter. Listen to my voice. She nodded faintly, struggling to keep her focus on him. Think about something that calms you, he said softly. Something that gives you peace. She swallowed. Like what? Like the lake house, he whispered. Her lips parted slightly, a trembling breath escaping. You remembered. I remember everything, he said quietly. She blinked again, but her vision blurred. Keanu, I didn't tell you the whole truth about why I left the event early, about why I've been distant. It wasn't just the headaches, it wasn't just the fear. Keanu felt the tension rise inside him again. Then what was it? She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a wave of pain hit her so hard her entire body tensed. Her hand flew to her head, her breath catching. Ah! Keanu caught her shoulders immediately. Sandra, breathe, breathe for me. She gasped softly. It hurts so much. We're here, he said quickly, his voice steady despite the panic ripping through him. Don't close your eyes, you hear me? Don't close your eyes. But her vision dimmed anyway, her gaze drifting downward. Sandy, Keanu said, his voice firmer now, look at me. She fought to lift her eyes, but her lashes were heavy, her expression fading. Keanu, she whispered through shaking breaths. And then suddenly, her body slumped sideways. Keanu caught her before she fell, cradling her carefully as the car sped into the hospital driveway. The doors burst open. Nurses and medical staff rushed toward them, pulling the door wide as Keanu lifted Sandra in his arms. She's losing consciousness, he said urgently, his voice cracking for the first time. They ushered him inside with her, guiding him into the emergency ward. Sandra's head rested against his chest, her breathing shallow, her face pale. Sir, we need her on this stretcher, a nurse said. Keanu hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to whisper into Sandra's ear. I'm not leaving you. They gently moved her onto the hospital bed. Machines beeped, monitors flickered. Nurses worked quickly, attaching wires, checking her pulse, calling for the doctor. Keanu stepped back only when they pushed him aside for space, but his eyes never left her, not even for a second. A nurse placed a hand on his arm. Sir, please wait here, we'll take care of her. I'm not going anywhere, Keanu said quietly. His voice shook just enough to betray the fear he was trying to hide. They wheeled her through the sliding doors, leaving him alone in the hallway, standing under harsh fluorescent lights that made everything feel colder, emptier. He felt helpless, truly helpless, and that feeling terrified him more than anything. Time passed slowly. Minutes felt like hours. The hallway echoed with distant sounds, footsteps, murmurs, the distant beep of machines, but Keanu barely heard any of it. He stood with his hands on his knees, breathing hard, replaying the moments in the car over and over again. Every look she gave him, every word she said, the fear in her eyes, the pain in her voice. He had seen her strong, radiant, unstoppable, but tonight she had collapsed in his arms, and that image refused to leave his mind. The doctor finally emerged through the double doors, clipboard in hand. Keanu straightened immediately, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break free. Is she okay? He asked, his voice tight, his throat dry. The doctor exhaled, choosing his words carefully, which only made Keanu more anxious. "She's stable for now," the doctor said slowly. "But she experienced a severe neurological episode. We've given her medication to ease the pressure and pain." Keanu felt a wave of relief, but it was thin, fragile. "Can I see her?" "In a moment. We're still monitoring her condition." Keanu nodded, though every part of him wanted to push through the doors and sit beside her. "Doctor," he said, "does she need surgery? Is this life-threatening?" The doctor hesitated. "We need more tests before we can answer definitively." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. "She said she had a diagnosis," Keanu whispered. "Something she didn't tell me the details of, something that was getting worse." The doctor nodded. "She did mention something to us earlier. She said she had been evaluated for a neurological condition and was told to watch for specific symptoms." Keanu's voice cracked as he asked, "And now?" "Now," the doctor said carefully, "it looks like those symptoms may be progressing faster than expected." Keanu's chest tightened. He felt fear crawling up his spine, but he forced himself to stay calm. For her. Finally, after what felt like forever, the nurse approached him. "You can see her now." Keanu walked into the room slowly, every step heavy, every breath tight. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and soft hospital sheets. Sandra lay on the bed, her head slightly elevated, wires attached to her arms and chest, a monitor beeping rhythmically beside her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steadier now but still fragile. Keanu pulled a chair close and sat beside her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He watched her, studying every detail, the faint lines of pain still lingering on her forehead, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, the slight tremble in her fingers. He reached out and gently held her hand. "You scared me," he whispered softly. "You really scared me." She didn't respond. She was still unconscious, still somewhere far away. Keanu stayed there for a long time, lost in his thoughts, his emotions, his fears. At one point, he rested his head on the back of her hand, closing his eyes. He didn't care how long he had to wait. He didn't care what time it was. He wasn't leaving her. And then, after what felt like hours, her fingers moved slightly. Just a small twitch, but enough to make him lift his head instantly. "Sandy," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered, slowly, hesitantly. It took a moment before her eyes finally opened. She blinked several times, adjusting to the lights, her breathing quickening when she realized where she was. Keanu leaned closer. "Hey, I'm right here." She swallowed, her throat dry. "Keanu, what happened?" "You collapsed," he said gently. "You're in the hospital now. They stabilized you." She closed her eyes again, tears forming. "I didn't want this to happen, not like this, not in front of you." Keanu brushed his thumb across her knuckles. "I'm glad I was with you. I don't want you going through this alone." She opened her eyes again, looking at him with the same vulnerable expression she had shown in the car. "I should tell you the rest." Keanu shook his head softly. "Not now, you just woke up. You need to rest." "No," she said weakly, shaking her head, her voice filled with urgency. "Keanu, the part I didn't tell you, it's the part that scares me the most, the part that changes everything." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Then tell me." She hesitated, her lips trembling, her eyes filling again. "Keanu," she whispered, "if my condition gets worse, there's something I need you to know, something I've been hiding for years." His breath caught. "What is it?" Her eyes locked onto his, soft, hurting, full of truth. "I wasn't just afraid of losing my health," she whispered. "I was afraid of losing you." Keanu felt his heart stop for a moment. "Sandy." But before she could finish the confession, before she could explain what she meant, a sudden alarm on the monitor began to beep rapidly, echoing sharply through the room. Sandra's eyes widened. Keanu stood up instantly. The nurse rushed in. The doctor followed. "Her blood pressure is dropping," the nurse said urgently. Sandra squeezed Keanu's hand weakly, her voice barely audible. "Don't leave." "I'm here," he said, his voice breaking. But the medical team moved quickly, surrounding her, adjusting wires, checking her vitals. Keanu stepped back as they worked, helpless again. And as the beeping grew louder, Sandra whispered the last fragile words before her consciousness started slipping again. "Keanu, I need to tell you the truth before it's too late." Her voice faded. Her eyes fluttered. The monitor beeped faster, and Keanu stood frozen. As the truth she had tried to reveal slipped through her fingers again, the truth she tried to hide. The room felt colder the moment Sandra's eyes rolled back, and her body weakened under the weight of the episode. Keanu stood frozen for a heartbeat, his mind trying to grasp the situation even as the medical team moved around her with urgent precision. The sound of the monitor beeping faster than before cut through the quiet room, filling it with a sense of impending danger. He watched helplessly as the nurse adjusted the Roman 4 line, and the doctor checked her vitals with a furrowed brow, the tension etched deeply on his face. Keanu wanted to stay close to hold her hand again, but they pulled him back gently, urging him to give them space to work. He stepped aside, his chest tight, his breath unsteady, his fingers trembling despite his effort to stay calm for her sake. He felt powerless, and the weight of that helplessness pressed heavily on him. He had always been the kind of person who supported others quietly, gently, without drawing attention. But here, in this sterile hospital room, he was confronted with a situation he couldn't fix with kindness or patience. It was out of his control, and that terrified him more than anything. The doctor finally spoke after several tense minutes. "Her body is under a lot of stress," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We managed to stabilize her again for the moment, but she needs rest. Her blood pressure is unstable, and her symptoms indicate her condition may be progressing." Keanu swallowed hard. "Is she in danger right now?" The doctor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She's not critical at this exact moment, but she is vulnerable. We need to run more tests. Tonight's episode was severe." Keanu nodded slowly, though the fear in his chest grew. "Can I stay with her?" "Yes," the doctor said, "but she needs quiet, and she may drift in and out of consciousness." Keanu thanked him softly, then moved slowly back to her bedside once they stepped away. He pulled the chair closer again and sat down. His body felt both heavy and weightless, like he was existing in two different realities at once. He took her hand gently, careful not to disturb the wires. Her skin felt cooler now, fragile in a way that made his heart ache. He watched her breathing rise and fall in a slow, uneven rhythm. Every inhale seemed to take effort. Every exhale seemed to carry pain. The sight of her like this made something deep inside him crack. He had known Sandra for so many years, through storms and laughter, through film sets and quiet moments, through life's unpredictable paths. He had seen her strong, confident, radiant. But seeing her lying helpless in a hospital bed, fighting something she had hidden from the world, shook him in a way he couldn't describe. He leaned forward slowly, his voice soft. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." His thumb brushed gently across the back of her hand, grounding himself in the simple contact. The room buzzed faintly with the sound of machines, but everything else felt distant. He focused only on her, on the way her face looked softer in unconsciousness, on the way her fingers twitched slightly as if searching for something familiar. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Keanu wasn't sure anymore. Time felt blurred, stretched thin and weightless in the dim hospital room. The world outside could have been paused and he wouldn't have noticed. All he cared about was the steady, fragile rhythm of her breathing and the way her hand fit into his. He thought back to the moment in the car, the way she had looked at him with fear in her eyes, the way she had said she didn't want him to worry. The way her voice had broken when she said she was afraid of losing him. Those words haunted him. Why would she think she could lose him? Why had she ever thought she needed to hide something so heavy alone? He squeezed her hand gently. "I wish you had told me sooner," he whispered. "You don't have to carry everything alone, you never did." For a moment he thought she wouldn't respond, but then, faintly, her lips moved. "Keanu." His breath caught, he leaned closer immediately. "I'm here." Her eyes were still closed, her voice soft, almost a breath. "Don't leave." "I won't," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "I promise." Her eyelashes fluttered slightly, then slowly lifted, revealing eyes still clouded with exhaustion but more awake than before. She blinked several times, trying to focus as she looked at him. "You're still here," she whispered weakly. "Of course I am," he replied gently. "I told you I'm not going anywhere." Tears formed at the edges of her eyes. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Keanu shook his head. "I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I could help." She swallowed hard, her voice faint but emotional. "You shouldn't be worrying about me. You have your own life, your own problems." You are not a problem, he said firmly but softly. You matter to me. Her eyes softened, but her expression carried something deeper, something she was still afraid to reveal. She looked away briefly, her breath shaking. Keanu, you don't understand. Then help me understand, he said. She closed her eyes again, as if trying to build the courage to speak words she had held for years. When she opened them again, they glistened with truth. I've been scared of telling you everything, she admitted softly. Scared of what you would think, scared of how things would change between us. Nothing you say will push me away, he replied. Her lips trembled. I wanted to protect our friendship. Keanu leaned closer, his voice steady. Our friendship doesn't need protection from the truth. For a moment, she just stared at him, searching his face as if trying to confirm he really meant what he said. Finally, she took a shaky breath. The diagnosis wasn't the only reason I pulled away, she whispered. It was part of it, but not all of it. Keanu felt his heartbeat quicken. What else? She hesitated again, her gaze drifting downward. I was scared of you seeing me differently, scared of looking weak, scared of you worrying, scared that if I leaned on you, I might lean too much. Keanu's voice softened. You can lean on me whenever you need. She gave a faint, fragile smile. That's the problem, I always wanted to. Those words hit him with a force he didn't expect. There was something deeper behind them, something emotional, unspoken, but powerful. Sandy, he whispered, whatever you're holding inside, you can tell me. Her eyes glistened. You say that like it's easy. It is, he replied gently, when it's with someone who cares. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression full of conflict, fear, hope, confusion, longing. She took a careful breath. The last few years, she began softly, I've been fighting this battle alone because I didn't want to drag you into it. You've been through enough in your life. I didn't want to add more pain on your shoulders. Keanu's chest tightened painfully. You're not pain, you're someone I care deeply about. Her voice cracked, and that's why I pulled back, because I was afraid I cared too much. Silence filled the room for a long second. Keanu felt something shift inside him, like the ground beneath him had softened, like something he'd known deep down finally took shape. Sandy, he whispered, his voice full of emotion. But she shook her head lightly, closing her eyes again. Don't say anything yet, please let me finish. He nodded, staying silent, giving her the space she needed. Her breathing steadied a little as she continued. When I first got the diagnosis, I didn't want to face it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was just tired, stressed, overworked. She took another shaky breath. Then the headache started getting worse, the memory slips, the dizziness, and last month they said it could be something that might change my life, maybe slowly, maybe suddenly. Keanu listened intently, his heart aching for her. He couldn't imagine the fear she had carried alone all this time. And I didn't tell you, she said softly, because I didn't want you to see me as someone fragile or someone who needed saving. You don't need saving, he said. You just need support, and I'm here. She smiled sadly. You always say the right thing. Because I mean it. She looked down at their hands, his fingers still wrapped gently around hers. Her voice softened as she spoke again. When I pulled away from you, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting both of us. Protecting us from what? Keanu asked softly. Her eyes lifted slowly to meet his. From the truth, she whispered. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Keanu leaned closer, his voice low. What truth? Her lips trembled, and she looked at him with an expression filled with years of unspoken emotion. The truth that I've been falling apart, and the only person I wanted by my side was you. Keanu felt his breath stop in his chest. She looked away quickly, tears slipping down her cheeks. But I was afraid that if I let you in, it would change everything between us, afraid that if something happened to me, it would break you. Keanu's eyes softened, his voice gentle. I'm stronger with you than without you. She shook her head. You don't understand. I've seen how much pain you've carried in your life, and the thought of adding to it broke me. Keanu squeezed her hand. You're not adding pain, you're someone I care about, someone I want to be here for. She stared at him again, her expression filled with a fragile mixture of hope and fear. You say that like you mean it. I do, he whispered. Her breathing steadied, her silence deepened. and slowly her expression softened into something even more vulnerable. "There's one more thing," she murmured. Keanu felt his pulse quicken. "What is it?" She hesitated for several seconds, tears slipping down her cheeks again. She inhaled shakily, gathering what little strength her body and heart still had. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Keanu, I didn't just pull away because of the sickness. I pulled away because I fell in love with you, and I didn't know how to handle it." Keanu froze. The world stilled. His breath caught. Everything inside him stopped moving. Sandra closed her eyes tightly, tears falling freely. "And I was terrified that if you found out, you would walk away." Keanu's heart pounded painfully against his ribs. He opened his mouth to respond. But before he could say a single word, the door burst open. A nurse rushed in, holding a clipboard, her expression stiff with concern. "We need to take her for another scan immediately," she said, her voice urgent. Keanu stood abruptly, his emotions tangled, his mind spinning. Sandra reached for him weakly, her voice trembling as they began to move her bed toward the door. "Keanu, please stay." "I'm right here," he said, walking beside the stretcher as they rolled her away. "I'm not leaving." But as they reached the hallway, the doctor stepped in front of him, raising a hand. "Sir, I'm sorry. You can't come into the imaging room." Keanu's breath faltered. "She needs me." "We'll bring you in as soon as we can," the doctor said. "This is necessary." The doors began to close. Sandra looked at him, her eyes filled with fear. "Keanu, please don't let this be the last time I see you." The doors shut before she could finish. Keanu stood in the empty hallway, her confession echoing silently in the air. "I fell in love with you." And the fear in her voice, as the doors closed, cut deeper than anything he had ever felt, the weight of unspoken feelings. The hallway felt impossibly long as Keanu stood staring at the closed doors, the ones that had separated him from Sandra in a way that felt heavier than any physical barrier ever could. He could still hear her voice echoing in his mind, trembling with fear and truth as she confessed the words she'd held for years. "I fell in love with you." Those 7 words softened and shattered him at the same time, and even though he wanted to cling to them, the fear that had filled her eyes in that last moment pulled at him with equal force. He pressed his hand against the wall beside the door, trying to steady his breathing. The hallway buzzed faintly with distant hospital noises, footsteps, whispers, the rolling of carts, but none of it reached him clearly. Everything felt muffled, like he was underwater. He wanted to burst through the doors and stay with her, hold her hand, tell her he wasn't going anywhere, that she wasn't alone, that her confession didn't scare him, but instead filled him with a warmth he hadn't expected tonight. But he couldn't. The doctors needed her, and he knew she needed them too. Still, the waiting felt unbearable. He paced a few steps, then stopped, then paced again. Each minute stretched into something slow and painful, as if time was punishing him for every moment he hadn't noticed the signs she'd been hiding for so long. He hated himself for not seeing it sooner. Her fading smiles, the moments she lost focus, the distant look in her eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. He had always been attentive, but maybe he hadn't been attentive enough. Maybe he had let the easy familiarity of their connection fool him into thinking she was fine. And now she was there, behind closed doors, fighting something he couldn't protect her from. Keanu leaned against the wall again, rubbing his hands over his face. He wasn't the type to panic openly, but something inside him felt like it was coming undone. The truth she had shared right before being taken away replayed in his head relentlessly. She had fallen in love with him, and she had been terrified of what that meant. Terrified it would change their connection. Terrified it would break something between them. Terrified it would break him. He understood her fear more than she knew. He had felt something for her for a long time too, quiet, steady, unspoken. He had buried it because life had taken them in different directions, because timing had never been right, because they both had families, responsibilities, worlds built on fragile balance. But the feeling had never disappeared. It had stayed, tucked away in a quiet place inside him, where he didn't have to face it, where it couldn't threaten their friendship or complicate their lives. But hearing her say, the words brought everything he had buried crashing to the surface. The doors finally slid open, and Keanu straightened immediately. A nurse stepped out, and he hurried toward her, his voice coming out softer but more desperate than he intended. "Is she okay?" The nurse nodded gently. "They're still scanning her, sir. It will take some time. We'll update you as soon as we can." Keanu exhaled slowly. Can I wait closer? You can wait right here, the nurse said kindly. We'll come get you. He nodded, though the waiting felt suffocating. He sat down on one of the plastic chairs lined along the wall. It felt cold, uncomfortable, but he barely noticed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. He didn't know how long he sat like that, minutes or hours, but his mind kept drifting back to the moment she collapsed in the car, the fear in her voice, the way her hand trembled in his, the way she tried to stay strong even when her body was giving out. She had carried so much alone, too much. He stared at the floor, his jaw tightening as he whispered to himself, "You should have been there sooner." He didn't know how long had passed when finally the doors opened again. This time it was the doctor. Keanu stood instantly. How is she? The doctor's expression was neutral, which scared him more than anything. She's awake, a bit weak but stable for now. You can see her in a few minutes. Keanu nodded quickly. Can you tell me what's going on? The doctor sighed lightly. We need to monitor her closely, but the scan showed increased inflammation around the affected area. It's not critical at this moment, but it's concerning enough that we want to keep her here for observation. Keanu's hands clenched at his sides. Is she in immediate danger? Not immediate, the doctor said gently, but she needs rest, monitoring, and further tests. Emotional stress can make her symptoms worse. Emotional stress? The words hit Keanu like a blow. Her confession, the fear she'd held in, the years of silence, everything she had buried inside her must have weighed heavy on her body and mind. He nodded slowly. Can I see her now? In a moment, we're moving her to a private room. He waited again, but this time he stood near the window, staring outside at the quiet night. The city lights glowed faintly, cars moved in the distance, but the world felt small and distant compared to what was happening inside these hospital walls. He rested his forehead against the glass, letting out a slow breath. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Then the nurse approached him again. Sir, you can come with me. Keanu followed her down the hall. The walk felt endless, each step heavy with the anticipation of seeing her after everything she'd said. As he approached the room, his heart pounded harder because he didn't know if Sandra remembered confessing her feelings, didn't know if she regretted it, didn't know if she wanted to talk about it or hide from it. He didn't know if she would look at him the same way or avoid his eyes entirely. But none of that mattered. He just needed to make sure she was okay. The nurse opened the door quietly. Keanu stepped inside. The room was dim, lit by a single soft lamp. Sandra lay in the bed, propped up slightly, her eyes open but tired. She turned her head slowly when she heard the door. When her eyes found his, something fragile crossed her face, relief mixed with fear, gratitude mixed with vulnerability. Keanu walked toward her, every step slow, controlled, gentle. He stopped beside her bed and lowered himself into the chair. He took her hand carefully, as if afraid he might hurt her. Hey, he whispered. She looked at him with a weak smile. Hey. For a moment, they just held each other's gaze. Neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of everything they couldn't put into words yet. Finally, Sandra took a slow breath. They told me what happened. I'm sorry you had to see that. Keanu shook his head gently. Don't apologize. I'm glad I was with you. She looked away for a moment, her eyes filling again. I didn't want you to worry. He leaned closer slightly. I'm going to worry. You matter to me. She swallowed hard, her voice quiet but full of emotion. I know, and that's what scares me. Keanu's brows furrowed softly. Why does it scare you? Her eyes drifted back to him, shimmering with tears she tried to hold back. Because I don't want to hurt you. I don't want you to see me like this. I don't want you to feel responsible for me. I don't feel responsible, he said softly. I care, that's different. She blinked slowly. Caring can break people. Not caring breaks them more. Sandra let out a soft, shaky breath, looking down at their intertwined hands. Keanu, before they took me away, I told you something. His heart tightened instantly. I know. She looked up again. Did I really say it, or did I imagine it? He swallowed. You said it. The room grew still. Her lips trembled. Then you know. Keanu nodded slowly. I know. She closed her eyes briefly, as if preparing herself for the worst. Do you hate me for it? The question hit him so hard his breath stopped. Hate you? He whispered, shocked. Why would I ever hate you? Her eyes opened slowly, tears slipping from the corners. Because I didn't mean to, because I tried not to, because I thought if you knew, it would ruin everything. He tightened his grip on her hand. Sandy, nothing could ruin everything. She gave a small, painful laugh. You say that now. I say it because it's true. She looked at him again, searching his expression for something he wasn't sure how to show. Something he had buried for years. Something he was suddenly afraid to say, but equally afraid not to. Keanu, she whispered, her voice trembling, I don't want to complicate your life. You're not complicating anything. Yes, I am, she said softly. My health, my emotions, my fear, all of it, it's messy. Everyone is messy, he said gently. Life is messy. What matters is who we go through it with. Her lips parted, her eyes widening just slightly, as if those words touched something deep inside her. I'm so scared, she whispered, of what's happening to me, of what might happen next, of how everything could change. Then let me be scared with you, he said quietly. You don't have to carry it alone. Her breath caught, and she lifted her other hand slowly, placing it against her forehead. I don't want you to feel trapped. I don't feel trapped, he replied. I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Her eyes filled again. Why are you so kind? He smiled softly. Why are you so surprised? She let out a soft breath, her voice barely above a whisper. Because kindness like yours always makes people disappear when things get hard. I'm not those people. She looked at him, really looked, as if finally seeing him through a lens unclouded by fear or doubt. And for the first time since the hospital ordeal began, she reached out and touched his cheek gently. Her fingertips were cold, but her touch carried warmth that hit him deeply. Keanu, she whispered, I'm not ready to lose you. His chest tightened. You're not going to. She shook her head softly. You don't know that. Then we face it together. Her breath trembled. Why? Keanu leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper, the words rising from a part of him that had been silent for too long. Because I care about you more than I've ever said. Her eyes widened just slightly, her breath halting. Keanu. He looked at her gently, honestly, openly. I should have told you sooner. I should have said it years ago, but I didn't want to complicate your life either. A tear slipped down her cheek. You feel something too. Keanu hesitated only because saying it felt like opening a door he had kept locked for years, but he couldn't deny it anymore. Yes, he whispered. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to cause pressure, or expectations, or confusion. Our friendship mattered too much, and I didn't want to risk losing you. She sniffed softly, tears streaming now. We both stayed quiet. He nodded, we both hit it. Her voice cracked, and now everything's falling apart. Or maybe, he said softly, it's finally coming together. She stared at him with a look full of love, fear, longing, and years of silent emotion. It was overwhelming and beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. She opened her mouth to speak, but a sudden knock on the door startled them both. The doctor stepped inside, holding a chart, his expression serious. Sorry to interrupt, he said softly, but we need to talk about her latest results. Sandra's hand tightened around Keanu's immediately. Keanu stood, protective instinct rising instantly. What's going on? The doctor looked at Sandra, then at Keanu. We found something in the scan, something we hadn't seen before. Keanu felt his stomach drop. Sandra's breath hitched. The doctor continued, slow and heavy. We need to discuss it right away. The room fell silent, and the truth they feared was just seconds away, the results that changed everything. The room felt colder the moment the doctor spoke, not because the temperature dropped, but because the weight of his words filled every corner of the space with a quiet tension. Sandra's fingers tightened around Keanu's hand, and he glanced down at her, noticing the fear rising in her eyes again. She tried to hide it, but this time she didn't have the strength to pretend. Tonight had stripped away every wall she usually kept up. Keanu straightened, bracing himself as he faced the doctor. What did you find? The doctor took a small step closer, his expression soft but serious. He held the chart in one hand, the pages trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of the news he was about to deliver. He glanced briefly at Sandra, as if giving her a silent warning that the truth might be hard to hear. The scan shows increased inflammation around the affected part of your brain, the doctor began gently. But that's not the only thing. Sandra swallowed hard. What else? The doctor hesitated, choosing his next words with care. There's a new cluster forming, smaller than the original, but concerning because it wasn't present in your previous scans. Keanu felt his chest tighten, his breath growing shallow. He looked down at Sandra, waiting for her reaction. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply stared ahead, her expression empty for a moment, as if her mind couldn't process the information fast enough. Then slowly her eyes began to fill with tears she fought to keep from falling. What does that mean? Her voice came out soft, fragile. It means, the doctor said carefully, your condition may be progressing faster than expected. We need to schedule more tests, possibly a biopsy, to determine exactly what we're dealing with. Keanu clenched his jaw, the urge to protect her rising inside him like a storm. Is it dangerous? The doctor nodded reluctantly. It could be. Sandra closed her eyes tightly, her lips trembling as she fought to steady her breathing. Keanu slid his thumb gently over her knuckles, grounding her the way she had desperately needed earlier. What are her options? Keanu asked, his voice quiet but steady. We need more information before we can make decisions, the doctor replied. For now, she needs rest. We'll monitor her overnight. Sandra nodded weakly, though her breathing came unevenly. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The doctor gave a gentle nod. I'll come back in the morning. When he left, the room fell into a silence so deep it felt almost physical. Sandra stared at the wall, her body sinking slightly into the pillows, her hand still holding Keanu's but with noticeably less strength. Keanu watched her carefully, waiting for her to speak, waiting to see what she needed. After a long moment, she whispered, I knew it was getting worse. Keanu leaned closer. You didn't know for sure. I felt it, she said softly. I felt something changing. I tried pretending it wasn't real, but my body kept reminding me. She lifted a trembling hand to her forehead. It was happening when we were filming last year. The headaches, the dizziness, I just ignored it. Keanu's voice softened. Because you were scared. She nodded slowly. Yes. He took a deep breath. I wish you had told me earlier. Her eyes glistened. I didn't want to ruin your peace. You wouldn't have, he whispered. You never ruin my peace. She looked at him with a fragile smile. How do you always say things that make everything feel lighter? It's because I mean them. She swallowed hard, lowering her gaze. Keanu, I don't know what's going to happen next. We'll face it together. Don't say that unless you're sure. I'm sure. She shook her head weakly. You shouldn't tie yourself to someone who might not even have a stable future. Keanu's eyes softened with emotion. He shook his head slowly. I'm not tying myself to your future. I'm standing with you now, today, and tomorrow, and whatever comes after. Sandra's lips parted, her breath trembling. Why? He reached out, gently cupping her cheek. Because I care about you more than you realize. She closed her eyes, leaning into his palm, her expression softening in a way that made his chest ache. Keanu, you deserve someone who isn't broken. You're not broken. Her voice cracked. What if I am? Then I stay, he whispered, especially then. She took a shaky breath, opening her eyes again. You're saying that now because you're scared, because you saw me collapse. She paused, pressing her lips together. You're acting on instinct, not on what you truly feel. Keanu leaned closer, their foreheads almost touching. I'm acting on the truth I didn't say for years. Her breath caught. Don't say things you might regret. I won't regret caring about you, he whispered. Not tomorrow, not in a year, not ever. Sandra's eyes filled again, a mixture of fear and emotion. You don't understand how heavy this gets. Then let me carry some of it. She shook her head. I don't want you to. You don't get to decide that alone, he said gently. This is just your fight anymore, not if you let me in. Her lips trembled. That's what scares me, letting you in. Keanu lifted her hand slowly, bringing it closer to his chest. I am already in. A tear slipped down her cheek. She reached up with her other hand and touched his chest lightly, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. Why does it feel like everything is happening too fast? Maybe it isn't fast, he whispered. Maybe it's everything we never said finally catching up to us. She stared at him, her eyes softening, her breathing slowing as the truth of his words settled inside her. Keanu, she whispered, her voice barely there. He leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair gently away from her face. Yes. I'm so tired of pretending. Then stop pretending, he whispered. With me you don't have to. Her breath trembled. I don't want to lose you. You won't. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with years of hidden tenderness. I'm scared of how much I love you. The words hit him with a force he felt through his entire body. And I'm scared of how long I've loved you without saying it, he replied softly. The room felt different then, warmer, deeper, filled with something fragile and sacred that neither of them could deny anymore. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd never said, everything they had held inside for too long. Sandra reached out slowly, her fingertips brushing the side of his face. If anything happens to me, don't. You need to know. He leaned into her touch. Nothing is happening to you. You don't know that. I don't need to know that to stay. Her hand trembled against his cheek. Keanu. He covered her hand with his own. Yes. If this goes wrong, if I get worse, she paused as emotion choked her. Promise me you won't blame yourself. His voice softened. I could never blame myself. Promise me, she whispered, please. Keanu swallowed hard. I promise to be with you. That's the only promise I'm making. She smiled through her tears, shaking her head gently. You're impossible. And you're worth it. Her eyes filled again, but this time her tears fell for a different reason. Something deeper, something warmer, something full of love she had denied herself for years. Keanu, she whispered again, there's something else I need to tell you. He leaned closer. I'm listening. She took a slow, trembling breath. The day I got the original diagnosis, I almost called you. I stared at your number for more than an hour, and then I put the phone down because I realized that hearing your voice would break me. He gently squeezed her hand. Why? Because I knew, she whispered, that if you told me everything would be okay, I would believe you, even if it wasn't true. Keanu swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the vulnerability in her words. You could have called me. I couldn't, she said softly, because I didn't want you to carry my pain. I didn't want to pull you into something dark. I wanted to protect you. He shook his head. I don't need protection from your truth. She sighed softly. I know that now, but I didn't then. He leaned closer. You can call me for anything, anytime, no matter what. Her lips parted, but before she could respond, a sudden knock came at the door. A nurse stepped inside, holding a small folder. Ms. Bullock, I have your updated medication schedule, and the doctor asked that I check your vitals again. Sandra nodded weakly. Okay. The nurse approached her, adjusting the monitor, checking her pulse, writing notes. For a moment the room felt normal again, the hospital routine filling the silence. Then the nurse spoke again. The doctor also asked if you'd like a visitor's pass for someone to stay overnight. Sandra looked at Keanu instinctively. The nurse noticed. He can stay if you want him to. Sandra's voice was soft. I do. Keanu's chest warmed at her words. When the nurse left, Sandra looked back at him with a quiet expression. Are you sure you want to stay? It's going to be a long night. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. She smiled faintly. Thank you. Keanu settled back into the chair, pulling it closer once again. Sandra's breathing steadied, her eyes soft as she watched him. You know, she whispered, if things were different, if I wasn't dealing with all this, maybe I would have told you sooner. Keanu smiled gently. Maybe I would have too. She closed her eyes slowly, her hand resting in his. Promise me something. Anything. Don't leave, even if I fall asleep. I won't. Her breathing softened, her face relaxing as sleep pulled her under. Keanu watched her for a long time, feeling his heart pound with emotions he had held back for years. And as he watched her sleep, he whispered to the quiet room. I love you too. But Sandra didn't hear it. She was already drifting deeper into sleep. When suddenly her body twitched. Keanu sat up straight. Her breathing changed, quicker, uneven, strained. He leaned closer. Sandra, Sandy, can you hear me?" She didn't respond. Her body trembled. Her fingers clenched. And then the monitor beside her started beeping faster. Keanu jumped to his feet. "Nurse, nurse." The alarm grew louder. Sandra's eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice cracking painfully. And then she gasped, her entire body tightening. As the monitor flashed red, the night that changed their story forever, the moment the monitor flashed red, the entire room plunged into a storm of urgency. Keanu's heart pounded as he shouted for help, his hands trembling as he reached for Sandra's arm. Her body tightened, her breath shortening, her face twisting with sudden pain. It felt like time collapsed around them, everything happening at once yet painfully slow, as if each second carried the weight of everything they had left unsaid. The door burst open, nurses rushed in, the doctor appeared seconds later. Voices overlapped, orders, medical terms, urgent commands, filling the room with frantic energy. Keanu backed away only because they pushed him gently aside, but his eyes never left Sandra for a single heartbeat. Every expression she made, every breath she struggled to take, felt like it was tearing through him. The doctor leaned over her, adjusting wires, checking her vitals. "Her levels are dropping again," he said sharply. "Increase oxygen, prepare the stabilizer." Keanu couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He stood frozen, his entire body tense with fear, watching the woman he cared about more deeply than he had ever admitted fight for stability, fight against the pain, fight for breath. The pounding in his chest felt like it might break through his ribs. Sandra gasped, her hand reaching out blindly. Without thinking, Keanu rushed forward and caught her hand in both of his. Her fingers were cold, shaking uncontrollably, but she squeezed weakly, as if anchoring herself to him. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice trembling and thin. He moved closer despite the doctor's warning. "I'm here," he said softly, his voice breaking. "I'm right here." Her eyes fluttered, unfocused and glassy. "Don't let me go." "I won't," he whispered urgently. "I'm not leaving you." The doctor glanced at Keanu. "Sir, we need her calm. Talk to her." Keanu nodded quickly, leaning down so she could hear him clearly despite the chaos around them. "Sandy, listen to me. Breathe with me, okay? Slow, gentle breaths. I'm here. You're safe." She tried to inhale, but the breath came jagged and sharp. Her body twitched again, and panic flared across her face. "Keanu," she gasped, "I'm scared." His voice softened, even though he felt himself unraveling inside. "I know, but you're not alone. I'm right here. I'm holding you." Tears slipped down her cheeks, her expression twisting with both pain and fear. "Don't leave me." He squeezed her hand tighter. "Never." The machines beeped rapidly, then slowly began to stabilize as the medical team adjusted her treatment. The doctor monitored her steadily, his voice quieter now but still serious. "She's responding," he said, his tone calmer. "Keep talking to her. She needs grounding." Keanu nodded again. He leaned even closer, his forehead almost touching hers. "You're strong, Sandy. I know you are. Just stay with me a little longer." Her breath shook as she exhaled. "I'm trying." He brushed his thumb over the back of her hand, grounding her with touch, with presence, with the quiet kind of love he had carried for so long. "You're doing great. Keep going." Her breathing steadied slowly, her heartbeat softened. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. The red on the monitor faded into yellow, then slowly back into green. The doctor let out a breath of relief. "She's stabilizing." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed with gratitude and exhaustion. The medical team moved around her more slowly now, adjusting wires, washing their hands, updating notes. The urgency in the room softened, replaced by careful observation. After a few minutes, the doctor turned to Keanu. "She needs to rest now. The episode was triggered by stress and exhaustion. Her body is strained, but she's out of immediate danger." Keanu nodded slowly, tears finally pooling in his own eyes. "Thank you." The doctor offered a small, reassuring nod. "Stay with her. She'll feel safer knowing you're near." When they left, the room fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Softer, calmer, filled with the faint hum of machines and the fragile sound of Sandra's steady breaths. Keanu pulled the chair close once more and sat down, his entire body trembling with leftover fear. He reached for her hand again, holding it with both of his as if afraid she might fade away if he loosened his grip. Sandra blinked slowly, her eyes finally focusing on him. She looked exhausted, pale, vulnerable, but alive. "Keanu," she whispered softly. He leaned in. "I'm here." She swallowed, her throat tight. I thought something bad was happening." "It was," he said gently, "but you got through it. You're okay." Tears filled her eyes, slipping silently down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of this." "I know," he whispered, brushing her cheek gently. "I know." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting his touch calm her. Then she opened them again, her gaze still full of fear but softened by something else, trust. "You stayed," she whispered. He nodded. "I told you I would." Her lower lip trembled. "Keanu, you shouldn't have to go through this." He shook his head softly. "I want to go through it with you." Sandra looked at him with raw emotion. "Why? Why would you want to deal with someone who might get worse?" "Because I don't love you for your strength," he whispered. "I love you for your heart." Her eyes widened slightly, emotion spilling over. "You love me." He hesitated only because the weight of saying it aloud felt like opening a door that could never be closed. But the truth in him was stronger than the fear. "I always have," he said softly. Her breath hitched, her eyes shutting tightly for a second as more tears fell. "Keanu." He leaned closer, brushing his thumb across her cheek again. "I didn't say it before because I thought I'd make things harder for you, because I didn't want to put pressure on you, because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything." Her voice trembled. "You never made anything harder." "I thought I might," he murmured. She shook her head weakly. "You made everything lighter, always." He breathed out slowly, heart aching. "I'm sorry you carried this alone. I'm sorry you didn't think you could tell me." Sandra looked at him, her eyes full of both pain and affection. "I didn't want to lose what we had. You're important to me." "You're important to me too," he whispered. Tears streamed down her cheeks again. "I didn't want to fall in love with you, Keanu. I didn't want to risk everything. But I did, and I didn't know what to do with it." He bowed his head, resting his forehead gently against her hand. "You didn't have to know what to do with it. You just had to let me in." "I didn't know how," she whispered. "Then let me show you," he said softly. A deep silence settled between them, not empty but full. Full of years of unspoken affection, hidden longing, quiet love that had waited patiently to be acknowledged. Keanu lifted his head again, meeting her eyes. "Sandy, I'm not leaving. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not after this." She looked at him with a tenderness so deep it almost hurt. "But what if I get worse?" "Then we face it," he said gently, "together." Her voice cracked softly. "I don't want to hurt you." "You're not hurting me," he whispered. "You're making me feel alive." She let out a breath, half a sob, half a sigh. "Keanu." He leaned forward, placing a soft kiss on her forehead, his lips lingering there for a moment as if sealing a promise. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of that moment settle inside her. "I'm scared," she whispered again. He rested his forehead against hers. "Then be scared with me." Her fingers curled around his. "Don't leave." "Never," he whispered. For the first time since the night began, her breathing steadied in a deep, genuine way. Calmer, softer, grounded by the presence of someone she trusted more deeply than she had ever admitted. The night stretched slowly, quietly. Keanu stayed beside her, watching her sleep, watching her breathe, watching her fight for her future with more strength than she realized she had. Hours passed, the hospital lights dimmed, the world outside grew still. And then morning arrived. Soft golden light seeped into the room, brushing gently across the sheets and across Sandra's face. She woke slowly, her eyes heavy but clear. When she turned her head, she saw Keanu still seated beside her, his body leaning forward slightly, as if he had spent hours frozen in that same position. Her heart softened instantly. "Keanu," she whispered. His eyes opened at the sound of her voice, and he smiled, tired, tender, full of relief. "Good morning." She squeezed his hand weakly. "You stayed." "Of course." She looked around the room slowly, noticing the soft light, the stillness, the calmness that had replaced the chaos from earlier. "I'm scared of what happens next." "We take it one step at a time," he said gently. "You don't have to face it alone anymore." She swallowed hard, her eyes filling again, but this time with something warm, something hopeful. "I love you," she whispered softly. Keanu's breath caught. He smiled, his chest aching with emotion. I love you too. She closed her eyes briefly, letting his words settle into her heart like sunlight warming cold skin. When she opened them again, her expression carried a delicate strength he hadn't seen before. Stay with me, she whispered. Always, he replied. And for the first time since her diagnosis, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. She didn't feel like she was trapped in fear or drowning in silence. She felt held, supported, loved. And in that fragile hospital room, with morning light spilling softly through the window, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves began something new. Not perfect, not guaranteed, not easy. But real. Something built on truth, on courage, on love that had waited years to be spoken. Something strong enough to carry them into whatever came next.